Yeah. Perhaps at this point I should ask you, Brother Damon, what exactly has happened currently? Because it seems like thousands of people are coming forward saying that they are targeted in their communities. Everybody is reporting that they are being hit with electromagnetic technologies, etc. And this goes back to the 90s, as I was saying earlier, with the DoD and the DOJ making this pact to develop joint advanced technologies together. How did that show up at the local police station, or is this something that's still being kept at the fusion centers and state police rather than the city and county police?
The fusion center, think of if you go and internet fusion food, Bing it, Yahoo, Google, whatever your search engine is, go put in fusion food. And you'll see how they might take, for example, some food from India, then from China, Cambodia, and Vietnam, and kind of mix these things up. It's still food, but it's just like it's a gumbo or something. It's different types of foods. Well, when you take that same fusion
Mm-hmm.
and you put it to the law enforcement, quote, public safety sector, first responder sector,
Mm-hmm.
then you got the local police department, you got the sheriff, constables, marshals, rangers.
So everybody is mixed in, is what you're saying, in the fusion
Yes, it's a
centers.
mixed
Everybody,
gumbo from the,
including the federal agencies as well, the
oh,
DHS,
yes.
the
In other words,
FBI, etc.
some people say, well, the Secret Service isn't there. Yeah, they're there.
Mm-hmm.
Department of Defense law enforcement. Yeah, they're there.
Yeah.
If you wear a badge from the tiniest little one-man police department up to the
Mm-hmm.
president's house, if you're a cop,
Mm-hmm.
you're there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody's there on your behalf. So say if I get the idea that you're a terrorist, I get this idea for some reason. I could have my own crazy, but I'm here, right?
You
So
mean just when you say you, are you saying somebody in the police department or
yes,
somebody in
yes,
one of
yes,
these
yes,
agencies? Somebody in
yeah.
police. Okay.
So, say I'm a police officer over here at ABC Apple Dumpling Police. Okay,
Yeah.
I think you're a terrorist. Now I could have just complete lunacy. There's, in other words,
Or you could have some kind of vendetta against somebody and you
yeah,
want to call them a terrorist, right?
right. Yes, it could be something real, imagined, accidental, or on purpose. But
Mm-hmm.
for no matter how I come to this, I
Mm-hmm.
tell my intelligence guy. And if I'm too small
Mm-hmm.
a city and we don't have nobody, I go to the county or the state, whoever's got intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I say, hey, I think this person is a threat. And this is why. So they got me this 2 or 3 page thing that I write up and question and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then that investigator is going to ask me some more miscellaneous, and he's going to put it on some of the supplemental. So a package, and then they're going to tell me, try and get a sample of her handwriting, try and get some of her DNA, uh, take
Why?
take pictures of her because they want to get a biometrics on you, everything.
I see.
So they can identify you in world camera systems. So then they want me to, get the tag numbers on your car, take pictures of your house, take pictures of people that come and go.
So they don't care to find out any further whether this person is really a terrorist or really engaged in something, dubious. They just want to get all this biometric data, all this personal private DNA and other
Right.
data.
So, some people are going to disagree with me and they're going to say, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Okay. Now, I can say this. I know that sometimes an officer can be overzealous and he can be known for being overzealous. And so sometimes when he goes to intelligence and stuff, they think about it 2 or 3 times before they send it upstairs. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, they say he's really peculiar, and he gets funny, unrealistic notions in his head all the time. He's a pretty good cop. He keeps the peace. People like him. He's okay, but he's kind of an airhead at times.
Mm-hmm.
And, he thinks a lot of people are bad guys that aren't. He don't mistreat people as far as he's concerned. He's
Somebody's
a good guy.
doing that because how could hundreds of thousands of people be added to the watch list every year otherwise? A whole bunch of somebodies across this nation are putting
Yes,
people on the watch list and naming people terrorists randomly. Because how else could this happen?
right. So what I'm saying is that then if I turn this in, it goes to that guy. That guy might not work at the Fusion Center, but he interacts with the Fusion Center. So maybe once a week, once a month, twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, he goes and takes this package. And it may have just general raw information from the area. It
Mm-hmm.
may have a lot of DNA stuff, but he
Mm-hmm.
takes it to the Fusion Center. Then they got analysts that may, have little square offices, and then they got big, like boardrooms, and they get stuff down and they say, well, let's talk about subject number Alpha Bravo Zebra 251. Okay. Okay, this is who this man or woman is. They're showing it on a PowerPoint thing. This is where they live. This is what
Mm-hmm.
drew the officer's attention to them. This is what they see or not. At that particular time, there's generally a consensus based on raw data. Uh, this is not a problem. We're just going to put them in the database and put them in a holding pattern. So you could be there for 50 years and you never see or hear nothing. It's just there.
Exactly. And what's happening right now, unfortunately, is that people are indeed reporting, and we are talking about people who are highly educated, people who have careers, who've had a lifetime career, possibly, who are retired, people who are professionals, nurses, doctors, lawyers,
Right.
engineers, coming forward today to say that they've randomly begun to be put under surveillance. They're being stalked everywhere, they're being monitored. Their own neighbors are engaging in community policing against them, coming
Right.
out and watching them and so forth, recording them, etc., and that they are being hit with microwave technologies. So that whole thing, and because I've been reporting on this for a little while, I can tell you I have witnessed the range over here. One of the people that I've spoken to was, living on campus at a university. And when she complained about picking up microwave pulse frequencies in her home, she was told by the campus people, actually the environmental health and safety people at the
Mhm.
university, that, we can't do anything about this. These are government satellite technologies. So you see, they kind of confessed it's the government doing this. So what can police do about this kind of thing? And why is it? And here's another question I have. When people go to police stations and say, it looks like I'm being hit with directed energy weapons coming from the direction of my neighbors, why do police react badly? Why do they say, oh, you must be delusional, you must be paranoid, we need to take you immediately, put you on a psych hold, involuntary psych hold, and take you to the local ER immediately? Why do police react like that when it is known in police stations that these technologies exist, that they're being used today?
Well, I tell people, or excuse me, back up, I tell the government, our public servants
Mm-hmm.
regularly,
Mm-hmm.
y'all even put into laws a lot of false assumptions and presumptions about people in general. Like you'll say, if you don't do something in so many days, it's presumed you don't care. Well, nobody said, well, what if you was going on vacation? What if you was in the hospital? What if you got called out of town in an emergency? So that's a false presumption. So you put an artificial number in there, and it's not that long of a number. It's like, 3 days, 5 days, 10 days. If you don't do this, it's not like the government where somebody's sitting there, 16 hours a day or 24 hours a day or, 40 hours a week going through everything. You're an actual man or woman and you got a life and you might not can do everything. But so y'all put false presumptions in there. Well, to be even handed and to be honest, I tell you firsthand that most police overall have no idea what you're talking about. I've been in this my whole life, and I've been able to connect dots since Derek shows. In fact, he talked to me for 2 hours a day beforehand, and I thought about everything he said, and I actually went to sleep. Like I have a team psychologist that works with me and other auditors, and then he's
Mm-hmm.
got two other friends, and they say, there's a lot of truth to sleeping on things. When you have a very long conversation with somebody, go over some of it and even talk out loud to yourself before you go to sleep, and your brain will figure it out during the night. When I got the next day, I said, "Oh, holy ding dongs. Uh, this was probably this. This was that. Now I understand this now." And I started doing a lot of extrapolation and dot connect. And then all of a sudden, I got me a picture with four corners I was trying to fill in. Then that night, I listened to people's questions, their thoughts, their so forth and so on, and then the specific questions that Derek was asking. So at
Mm-hmm.
that point in time, I did even more. Since that time, I've had communication with numerous people, both in the government and private sector, uh, that have asked questions and put out propositions to me and said, well, what if this, what if that? How can I figure out who's targeting me? So I'm doing a lot of researching, and I've been making a lot of calls. But I guarantee you, we'll just pick uh, any town USA. We'll go there, and we can just find three policemen. Whether it's the chief or a guy on the street or the elected sheriff, we just find three policemen somewhere in the city or county. We just find them, and we say we're going to pay you to take this survey, okay? And they're actually going to make some money, and say there ain't no right answers, no wrong answers. Don't put your name on none of these. It's going to be private. We just want you to answer this. And you ask questions like, do you understand RF technology? Do you understand microwave technology? Do you understand energy weapons, heat and cooling weapons? And after each one, if so, tell us briefly what you know about it. And you're going to get a lot of no, 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 no. And these guys have egos. They're going to want to prove their knowledge. They literally don't know. Now, that don't mean that we picked the right three. You could have one that he watches all kind of YouTubes. He's listened to talk radio for the last 30 years. He's got open mind. He's a thinker, but he might be the only one at that department. That if you told him, he might say, wow, how long has this been going on? It's not going to be, are you kidding me? Or are you off your medication? He's not going to go straight to you're a nut. He's going to go to asking questions to determine, because he knows these things are real. So he's going to try and qualify you. He's going to try and qualify the information. He's going to separate you from the information. Okay. You're okay. He's just going to give you an automatic check. He or she's okay. How long has this been going on? What time of day or night is it happening? Where do you think it's coming from? Who do you think's doing it? Why do you think they're doing it? And then the last question that they teach law enforcement the last bunch of years, thank God, is what do you want me to do about it? Now, some cops, the way they talk, it sounds like they're a jerk. What do you want me to do about it? But they're taught to ask you, but I always said, what would you like to see me do? That sounds a lot nicer. More,
Right.
And I find out. And then I say, do you think I can achieve that? Because sometimes they'll have fantastic expectations. I say, do you think I could do that?
Mm-hmm.
If you was in my shoes, do you think you could do that? So I want to bring their expectations down to here, which is probably in my ability. But they got these feather in my arms that go out expectations. But when I turn it around and say, could you do it if you was in my shoes? Well, then that actually gets to be a much smaller area than I can actually do. They actually they went overrating, now they're underrating. I say, well, I
Right.
can actually do this, and I can work on this.
Now,
But
this is you speaking as a retired police chief. Now,
yes,
if you were still inside the police department, it sounds like, they just ask form questions and they just take you off to the ER and have somebody else deal with it, like not a psychologist, a psychiatrist or a doctor deal with it over there. So, it sounds like the police are not being educated to understand that people are indeed being hit with these technologies. But there is an awareness that these technologies do exist, right?
yes. I don't, for a few reasons. Maybe later I can do differently, but for right now, I had this big, long diatribe of explanation to some things that happened in 1990. I'm willing to hit a couple of highlights, but I don't want to go back through the whole story now.
No worries. We can do it another time. We've had a
Yes,
long
but
conversation.
let me just say that
Mhm.
uh, I had a another officer I knew, and he was trying to help me get a job at another department in Florida.
Mhm.
I called the man at the department. I told him what he said. The man got scared and hung up. I didn't know I'd done nothing wrong. But this was dealing with the operations that these people dealt with was in the 60s and with the CIA and other people. And, it was just regular, hey, y'all worked at so and so together. And then my chief of police, he actually has what they call today men in black come visit him and tell him to explain to me to never call this officer again, never call this department, forget he exists. And my chief, he did not scare easy. He used to be a narcotics agent in the 60s out in Nevada, and he had to deal with mafia people. And he did a lot of special things for the federal government and law enforcement. He didn't scare easy. He had guns put in his face, but he was scared. He was sweating bullets. And he said, they didn't even tell me, but don't call this man, don't mention his name. He said, I don't want to know nothing. He said, I'm just telling you that they're telling me I'm responsible for you because I'm your chief of police. And if you go back or call or do anything, they're going to come talk to me about it. And he says, I know that means I'll never be seen again. He said, bad things happen in this world. I don't want to go missing. I like being the chief here and I like, my life. Okay. I go home. I'm like, what in the world's going on? But anyway, I go to bed the next morning. Three of these guys are on my porch beating on the door like they're fixing to knock it off the hinge. Two of them sitting around this car, and they're what I'd call men in black. I come to the belief that they're naval intelligence, but it could be wrong.
Mhm.
But I knew that they were government men, the way they talked, the way they dressed, the way they act. There was no mistaking it, zero. But they had a lot of militarisms about the way they handled themselves. But they had a lot of law enforcement. So I said, it's like military law enforcement combo.
Interesting.
And they basically told me, hey, we had a talk with your chief. Y'all visited with each other. And I kind of went like, well, you would know the answer to that because you're obviously a spook. So, uh, but anyway, I said, yeah, we talked. Do you understand this? Do you understand if you call there, you mention this guy or these operational names, if you even say them out loud again, we're going to come see you, and it's not going to be good. And so I called a friend of mine that I dealt with for buku years, and I was his little buddy, and I told him, hey, I'm in trouble, something's bad's happening, and he hangs up the phone on me. I call back, his wife answered the phone, and she said he's gone. And I said, what's going on? She says, all I can tell you is just sit tight, and said, I'm sure he'll talk, see you or call you or do something, just don't call back. Okay. About, let's see, I'm trying to remember if it was that same day, but whatever it was like 12 hours later,
Mhm.
which was the time it would take to drive from Northeast Texas, where he was at, to Northwest Florida. I get a phone call. It's him on the other end, and he says, go to this truck stop. And I said, well, what? And he says, I'll make myself available to you. Just come. Okay. I go there and I see this truck in the very back and it flashes these headlights at me. I go back there, it's him. He closes the curtain around. Then he starts flipping some switches. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm putting a energy field around us. I said, ooh, I thought it was all funny, right? Then he
Yeah.
takes this compartment, opens it up, and there's a lot of things in this compartment. It looks like radio gear. Some I do know, but it looks way advanced than what I've been seeing.
Okay.
And and he basically has these pads and this phone on there, and he says, "Hey," he said, "give me the address of somebody you know." And I did. He punched some things in here, and he said he's going to punch it in his electronic brain. He punched this stuff in. He says, "Listen in there." He said, "You can't talk in it, not for this, but you can listen." So I put the phone up to my thing, looked like a regular phone with a long cord on it, and I listened, and I can hear the conversation inside somebody's house. These people I know personally.
Wow.
And I handed the phone back. He says, "What?" And I said, "How are you doing this?" He said, "This system here links up with a satellite. The satellite tilts just a fraction wherever it has to, and it sends a beam down to the actual structure of the house. And whatever they're saying inside emanates in the actual structure, and it calculates mathematically or something, but somehow it comes out in the tone of their voice where it's just like being on a phone. It's like the house is an amplifier, and they listen to everything you're saying, and it goes up to that satellite and goes right back to him." And I
Wow.
said, "You did that from here?" And he said, "Well, actually, I did it from here to a military installation. The military installation is the one that goes up to the satellite down to what you're doing from a military." He said, "How do you think we find people in foreign countries?" He said, when somebody's on the loose and they're a bad guy, if we don't get them, it's because we don't want them. We can get anybody we want in 24 hours anywhere in the world. That's not a problem. As a matter of fact, I talked to him when Osama bin Laden was on the run. He said, "We're not ready to get him. It's not beneficial at this time. When it's beneficial, we'll go get him."
So, in other words, they can locate and they're able to locate anybody at any time.
Yes, he said there's limitations due to electrical storms. There's limitation to heavy cloud coverage. There's limitations in caves. And he said, like over the Middle East, he said, it's just too many caves to count. And said a lot of people there are tribal, and a lot of them live in caves, or they hide in caves or in
Mm-hmm.
spiders' nests. And
Mm-hmm.
said, we can't see that. And he said, he said that show that Will Smith was in, Enemy of the State,
Mm-hmm.
him and he said that's for real. He said that's not a joke. That is for real. He
Was this
said
guy NSA or was he naval intelligence, as you were saying?
well, the guy I knew, he was with the CIA.
Oh,
He
with
was
the
actually
CIA.
he was actually in the Marine Corps, and the CIA recruited him. And he had done a
Okay.
lot of things in Vietnam, and they thought that he had a special skill set. They wanted to harness that and take him to the next level. And so he become a pretty important guy within the system.
Okay.
And
Now, if they know this stuff, if they can actually locate and hear every conversation, doesn't it also follow that they would also know for certain if somebody is a terrorist or not?
if you extrapolate it out, that makes perfect sense. Now, like he told me, and of course that was in 1990. Of course, we've talked since then. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, he says, we know what we know. We can know anything we want to know.
Mm-hmm.
He says, now, if you're a government official in a foreign land, he says sometimes their military or their government takes precautions on their end. Like there's certain materials they can coat their house in to shield it. Uh, there are deflectors, and of course the way he was talking, he wasn't talking about energy weapons and microwaves. He was just talking about listening, amplification. Okay,
Mm.
he said we don't use it to go get warrants because that would be illegal. He says, so no federal judge is going to sign off on a warrant when you say, we got a spy satellite up there and we can listen to you and your wife too, Judge. We can hear what you're doing in there in the bedroom, Judge. But
Right,
sometimes,
right.
but said
But
there are,
I also meant that in a sense of elimination. You have hundreds of thousands of people added to the watch list, but can't, these agencies figure out if those people need to be on the watch list or not? I mean, do hundreds and thousands of people need to be on
but,
the watch list?
but you got, like he said, you got to figure out how to put a taco in a hamburger wrapper and vice versa. He said, these people don't think in the terms most people think. He said, you and me. He said, if we walk into a room, we look at 1,000 things nobody else looks at. And said, have you not talked to your wife and said, did you notice this? And she'll say, no. Did you notice this? And I said, women are far more observant than men by nature, especially on specifics, jewelry, makeup, the color of shoes somebody wore, a necklace, a ring. So
Mm-hmm.
they're very observant to things, and they see color better than men and differently.
Mm-hmm.
Said, but you'll find 10 times as much as your wife said. So that tells you you're not a normal man. but you've
Mhm.
been trained life and death. If you miss something, you could die. If you miss something, somebody else could die.
Yeah,
And you,
that's legitimate kind of observation and analysis. I'm talking about the illegitimate watch
yes,
listing of people, the wrongful watch listing of people, of
okay.
absolutely innocent people, and that seems to be what's going on
I don't, I don't know how far
massively.
the technology's gone today. Okay, I can't answer that, but I can tell you this: if that's 27 years ago, and he said we're 30 to 40 years ahead of the public, whatever you're doing now, we had it 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
It might not be, it ain't finalized the way you see it today,
Hmm.
but we could operate it back then. Said, that was a workaround. We figured out how to do it then.
Hmm.
He said, we carried water in certain kind of thermoses back then. Well,
Hmm.
now you got a thermos, but it has a filter on it, and those didn't, because we know you need a filter. We also didn't have cooling technologies to put room between things to keep it the same temperature for extra hours. He said, so it's the same thing, but we're getting better at it. So hypothetically, if I say you're a terrorist, I think you are. I have a suspicion for whatever reason. And then I talk to people, and you get over to the fusion center. First thing the fusion center is going to do is put out a information sheet on you to all area law enforcement. It's going to have your picture. It's going to have uh, whatever they want to tell.
Hmm.
Okay. And says, so if you see this woman, uh, keep an eye on her and return intelligence to this contact officer. And so they just build a bigger and bigger file, and then
Hmm.
they decide that you're not worthy of their attention, and they just put you. Or they say, wait a minute now, she's pretty much okay, but we found a couple of hangnails. Then you go up to the next level and the next level. And at some point, then you're on the thing where you're constantly going to be monitored forever. You're
Hmm.
never going to
Yes,
know.
and the question is now, of course, now that we have fusion centers with all of these agencies, and we're talking about agencies like the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA, Army intelligence, Navy intelligence,
Right.
various research labs, the Air Force Research Lab, the US Navy Research Lab, all of these
Right.
agencies, research institutions, etc., are working together. And you said that a lot of information is collected by the police, and this is sort of sold as third party information to a whole bunch of private entities. So, is that the ways in which this kind of information about people who might be absolutely innocent then gets put out to people? Like, for instance, the security service agencies who may be testing out some of these advanced technologies, these
Yeah.
microwave technology.
My friend told me in 2003, 2004. Let's see, 2003. I was the chief of police, and he told me, I happened to see
Mhm.
him. I was in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex. And he said, if you're a really smart man,
Mhm.
he said, I got some money, and I'm going to do some with some money, but I don't have that much. He said, then you go invest in uh, data mining technology. Invest in some of these companies. He said, I give you the name of three or four. There's probably 50 or 100, but he said these three or four, are high end and they're managed right. And said, for every dollar you put in
Mhm.
10 years or less, you'll make $100 for every dollar you put in. And said, the sky is the limit, but that's the minimum. He said, so, it's like a 99% whatever increase every 10 years. And he said, there's not nothing in the stock market, there's nothing in CDs or anything else. And he
Mhm.
said, if it works where technology grows at such a heavy, 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 fast rate, said you could get $300 or $400 for every dollar. And he said, if you don't do it, at least pretend like you put $500 today in and go back and check. And it just seemed like, I'd forget about it. He'd remind me, he said, your money would now be $60,000. Your money would now be 92,000. I said, but it's too late. He said, no. He said, you can still do it. He said, it's still a gold mine. There's still gold. It's just not as much, and it's not as rapid. In other words, now where you had to do 5,000, you might have to do 10 or 15,000 now to make it kind of equal out. But said you can still turn into 100, 150,000 in a few years. I said, why? He says, because that is the new gold. Information, data on you. everything you eat, everything you drink,
Hmm.
how many hours a day are you awake? Do you like men or women, or you like both? Do you have kids or you don't? What's your religion? Because everything's geared to controlling the mass population.
I'm glad you said that because I was going to say that's what's coming down, with not just coming down the pike. That's what appears to be in operation currently, is absolute mass control, and it's coming down from those central government agencies.
Yes, and people used to underestimate LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president. They underestimated him. He had a bag of dirty tricks. Some of it's starting to come out on recordings from the
Oh
White House.
yes, well,
But he's the only guy that ever had any competition with J. Edgar Hoover. J. Edgar Hoover used to get dirt on people and control the government with his dirt. Even
hmm,
though he was very dirty himself, he was keeping on other people.
hmm,
But Johnson was the master, and he had so much stuff on J. Edgar, he could just about make him dance on the head of a pin. But he didn't push it because J. Edgar had stuff on him. So they kind of had a gentleman's truce. I won't push your buttons and you don't push mine. I'll tell you what I need, you deliver, you tell me what you need, and I'll deliver.
very
Okay.
interesting.
And so part of the thing was we need as many people as we can to get on welfare. People that are conditioned to taking handouts will keep doing what they have to do to get those handouts. And that's one of the way we're going to control mass population and overgrowth is so if they know they can get some food stamps, they know they can get some subsidized housing, subsidized electric, they're either not going to have no job at all or a part-time job. And we're going to tell them, hey, if you don't do what we say, we're going to cut you off. We're going to be able to control millions of people that way. Then we're going to make the tax structure where anybody that's got the power to do things, we're going to tax them at a higher rate where we can kind of control them and control their money because they got power to do a lot of things. And we're going to create a campaign that if somebody is credible and a good voice and they're starting to out things, then all that data mining we did, that included them. So we're going to dig into our bag of tricks to know how to discredit them and demonize them. You
Oh,
know?
they're doing it already. That's the kind of thing they're doing today.
Oh yes, yes, yes. But I'm saying some of these things have been going on since 1964.
Hmm.
You know,
Sure.
in
Yeah,
planning stages.
absolutely. Yeah, they've been doing
Because
it a long time, is what you're saying.
I know a man that's I guess he's still alive. He was here recently. He he was a party of a conversation with LBJ. And LBJ said a lot of things, but one of them was the Voting Rights Act is not for the black people. It is to make them Democrats and keep the Democrats in power. And we have a plan of how we want to run things. In other words, he was talking about socialized medicine back then. He
Right.
was talking about a welfare system then and a nanny state from birth to death, cradle to grave. So he says, what we have to do is we have to convince them I'm not a redneck and I like black people. And he said, for the next 50 years, if you're a black man, you'll vote for a Democrat. And he said, I'm going to set these systems up. He said, I'm also going to make it geared towards black people. They're never going to figure it out that I'm trying to get them in Section 8 housing. I'm trying to get them on food stamps. He said, I don't care if we got a few million crackers in there, meaning white folks, derogatory term. He said, I don't care if we got a few million of them, but we're going to get 90% of the Negroes in there, except he didn't say Negroes. And he said, we're going to control them. And then they're going to give us a vote, and we're going to stay in here. And he was big into mind control. And he said he didn't know all that stuff, and some of it sounded like foolishness and that it was nonsense, but that some of it was right. But Henry Kissinger told him, it's real. It's real. Said, it's not nonsense, it's real. He said, well, some of it's goobly gart to me. He said, but it just because you don't understand Greek don't mean that there's not a Greek language. And another guy was a Secret Service agent who worked for Kennedy. And he told me a lot of things about Kennedy and how Kennedy was trying to fix it where the military industrial complex that was coming on strong. Eisenhower gave some speeches, and he had a private conversation with Kennedy and said, I've done what I can do at this point. You're going to have to take the torch and you can't just give them a whole steak. You're going to have to spoon feed them a little bit at a time until they can get up for solid food. But during your presidency, you're going to have to cut down the military industrial complex or we'll be a police state. And said, we'll be no better than Russia or China. And Kennedy took him at his word, and he was working on that. But certain powers, the people that wanted the warmongers and the industrial complex, said if we get rid of Kennedy, then Johnson will be in, and Johnson don't give a damn. He'll give us the green light and we'll run on so long as we give him what he wants. He wants the nanny state. We want data. We want information. We want control. So Johnson got what he wanted for the Democratic Party, and then military industrial complex, by the time Nixon come in, was a mean machine. I mean, it was bad when Eisenhower was there, but I mean, the longer it was bad. And the technology kept being developed. And they got black projects just off the books. And a particular man that was in the military, he said, let me show you how this works. Because I asked him, I said, there's got to be accounting for money. He says, yeah, but he said, only a few people in the House and only a few people in the Senate ever get to see any of this information. And he says, but they're explained that if they talk about it, they'll be dead, or their wife or son will have a mysterious accident. Mm-hmm. So they keep quiet. But said what they do is said, on the top side of the budget, it may say $2 trillion to operate the government. And says, but this Black Ops project needs, $60 billion for something. And said that's what goes off into things like MK Ultra. This is what goes off into I want us to call them watchers, but there's another word. But they can see what you're doing. They're told some information about you, and they can figure out where in the world you're at, what you're doing, and they'll draw diagrams of your room.
Oh, the remote viewers.
Yeah, remote viewers. Yeah.
Project Stargate.
Yeah, remote viewers started back then too, and then they had brain scanners or something like that. I'm trying to remember, but he explained it that I can focus on you, just a human being. I can focus on you and think about you, and I can cause you to be nauseous, or I can cause you to start blinking or not be able to talk correctly because I'll be
sending psychic energy. Yes.
Yes. But they would have people that would train. They would train to move objects with their mind. They would visualize people being sick. And they would look at just horrific pictures. And then they would think about that person to send that energy to them to break them down or hurt them.
And these were part of all the black projects from people like the CIA and these other intelligence units.
Yeah, because see, before DHR, the CIA, they were told your ears have to be turned outward. You can't listen to the United States. You can only listen to foreign governments and foreign officials, and then you bring that intelligence back centrally so we know how to protect ourselves.
Right.
Well, then in the 90s under Clinton, they started getting a couple of exceptions. Well, you can turn your ear in occasionally for this, this, and this, but it's a few little special things. Right. And they kept saying, well, we got to be able to turn our ears in to follow through and do this. They made up all kinds of reasons. But when DHR come along, everybody got combined. Okay. The DHR is the open intelligence. The fusion centers are the hidden side.
Do you mean DHS?
Yeah, DHS. excuse me.
DHS, Homeland
Yes, yes,
Security.
yes. Homeland Security. Yeah, they're they're kind of like, you got a potato that grows in the ground. The fusion center is the potato in the ground. The thing that you see sprouting above, that is DHS, Department of Homeland Security. So part of it you see above ground, and part of it's below ground. They let you see what they want you to see.
That's very
Well,
true. I think that's very true. They're keeping a lot hidden. And, they're keeping it hidden even from FOIA requests. As I was telling you earlier, when I made a request to the Massachusetts Fusion Center, the Commonwealth Fusion Center over here, keeping public safety in mind, I asked for a list of the surveillance weapons. And it's true, I used the word weapons. People told me later, you should have used the word devices, but I didn't know. So I asked for the surveillance weapons that were being used on the streets in Massachusetts today. And the response I got from the chief of police, from the state police over here, which is apparently the head of the Fusion Center, was that in keeping public safety in mind, we cannot provide you such information.
now, if I'm a chief of police and I'm working on an investigation, and you're asking me about the investigation outside of me tell you we have some leads or we don't have none now, and I give you what they'd call like courteous information that the public can have some confidence in me and my
Right, I
department.
understand that when you're doing an investigation. Yeah.
But but if you say I want a copy of your budget, that has nothing to do with it. If I don't give it to you, it's because I don't want you to know how much we get paid or what we're doing with our money. If if I have a list of people in the jail and you say I want a list of it, and I don't give it to you, it's because I'm trying to hide it. Why am I hiding it? In other words, there's so very, very little. There's what they call tactics and methods. And the Department of Justice has said tactics and methods are uh, there's a word they use for it in business, but it's a proprietary thing. In other words, it's something that we don't tell you. But hypothetically, let's say uh, we
Well,
don't we don't tell you how we're trained with shotguns and machine guns, but we tell you we have them.
Well,
Okay.
yes, and that really, I think it should be a matter of public knowledge because we are
Yes.
living in a public space and, the police are here supposedly to protect us. So I think
Yes.
the public has a right to know what kind of weaponry the police is using. So it's very odd that they would say that they are going to withhold that information. But in fact, that's the case. I'm not the only one who's gotten this response. I think nationally speaking, there is very little information available on the full roster of the kinds of surveillance technologies and devices that are being used because more and more, I understand, is being rolled out today under the aegis of biometric surveillance, for one thing.
Yes.
Right. And for another, there are all of these advanced EMF technologies that are part of their DOD, DOJ Memorandum of Understanding that are not being divulged. And as you say, could be used by different agencies, whether it's the FBI and CIA using it or the NSA using it against people. We don't know, but they're most certainly in use, and people have come forward to whistleblow about these technologies. So,
Yes. I have I've not been on location, so I want to make that clear. And I want to think of how I want to say this. I have seen some videos that other people probably haven't seen. And in these videos, they actually showed a microwave technology gun. I mean, that's what I'm calling it. And he said, and the guy showing me says, this is just like a machine gun mounted on the back of a military apparatus or a vehicle. Said we can actually aim it where we want it to go, and we can turn up the level or turn it down. Instead, hypothetically, said, they do it to a building, then that radiation starts going in the building. It said it treats what's in the building like it's actually in a microwave. It cooks from the inside out. Inside out. Said so.
yes.
whoever's in there said, sometimes we've been after certain fugitives in other parts of the world, and we've deployed this weapon and said we heat up a building to make them come out because they'll use gas mask. So if we shoot stuff in their gas mask, they're not going to come out. We do grenades, they're not going to do nothing. Said so the only way is cook them out. And said so we put this on them and we cook them out. And they come flying out the windows and doors because they don't want to be eaten alive. They don't even know what we're doing. They just know they got trying to get away from trouble. And said when they get away and they're no longer feel like their insides are cooking, their brains turn into mush. He said, in other words, we start off slower and we start working our way up. And said at a certain point, we don't do it to where it's like it could kill somebody. And some people have died. But it's not specifically designed to do that. It's designed to get compliance, to give us control. I said, I keep hearing that word control, 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 control.
This
said,
is an active denial system, and you say that this was shown to you, this video was shown to you. Was it by somebody in the military, or?
It was a guy that knows a lot about technology. He was in the service at one time.
Mm-hmm.
He's no longer in. But this wasn't his main bag.
Okay.
But he works and interacts with people like at MIT and I think it's Cal State and a few other places. But anyway, whether it's internet technology like we're here now talking across the country to each other, whether it's this or it's a stun gun, a taser. He said, you know, these tasers come out of the 1960s. And said, but the public didn't know about them until recently.
Very good point. Really, that's huge info.
And said, we introduced it to get it into law enforcement because we were militarizing local police departments because of the Posse Comitatus Act. You cannot use the American military on American soil against the American people or to perform law enforcement functions. But said they did it after 9/11, didn't they? They went in every airport, went in cities, said so they violated the Posse Comitatus Act in the name of safety. Said you either have safety or liberty. You don't have them both. And
very good point.
He said, you got Benjamin Franklin. He said, we gave you a republic. Said, you know, it's up to you how long you keep it. And said, if you give up any of your liberty, you don't need it nor security. You don't deserve either. So he said, you know, there's guys like me in the military that have left and said, we let certain people know certain things to keep this information moving. He says, we're hoping for a mass awareness over time. But these guys are the behind the scene guys that won't let their name or nothing be known. But they tell me, people that do talk, they let us know. And
and I'm grateful that you are talking and you are, you know, spreading this information because, as we were saying a little bit earlier before we started this conversation, everything that any of us does to put this information out in front of the public so that all of us become aware of this.
Yes, ma'am.
The more chance we have collectively as a country, right, to have some change here. So we can roll back this militarizing of our police, roll back this controlling of our communities and our
right. The police in this day and time. I've dealt with police that's been in as long as me and a little bit that's been longer than me. Okay. I know one that's been in since 67, 68, 69, somewhere in there in the late 60s. He came in just after they did the Miranda thing. I think actually when he first started, there was no Miranda warning. But and there wasn't no police academies neither. But anyway, we'll come across what we call these young bucks, young officers, and they'll be real go-getters. Well, that's good. We let them run and fetch things and, you know, do things to burn off their energy. But we have to go to scenes. And when I say, you know, I'm talking about because it's been my whole life. I'm not doing it right this minute. But we've had to go to scenes and practically peel some officers off of people in the past because they were in their face and they had lost control of the situation and they was trying to regain it, by making threats and said, that's not how it works,
Hmm.
you know. But we've had to get between them and, tell this officer, you go over there and cool down. I'm going to talk to him. Well, you don't understand this, that. And I said, well, you got two choices. You can go over there, you can get another job. Okay. I said, I'm trying to talk to you in private and try and handle this with respect, but you lost control. And I go talk to the person. I say, how did this officer come to talk to you? What was going on? And said, there, and part of it is we've been at war for 18 years in foreign countries. Okay, so their customs and their traditions there are totally different than here. Okay, so first of all, you get a man or woman, more men, but women too, that are desensitized to American customs and traditions, American freedoms, because when they go there, they are the law. When they say something, you do it or you die instantly. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. They'll do the paperwork later. So they stay on that mindset. A lot of them come home with PTSD and they're not diagnosed. A lot of them are diagnosed, but they quote they're under treatment. So they still pass the psych eval. They get on the police department, but they have flashbacks. They have, you know, us and them mentality. It's us against them. Like they're
Right.
still in Iraq or Afghanistan, Pakistan, wherever they're at. They act like they're still there. They haven't decompressed. They haven't reassimilated, and they're quick to pull guns. They're quick to threaten people. A lot of them have shot people. I told some people the other day, I said, in the late 1970s, we was really concerned for the number of police officers being killed. And these were when they were real peace officers. Now, I'm not saying that some of them didn't do bad because they did. Uh, we saw police use dogs and fire hoses on people. We've seen people based on their race, religion, other things get beat up. We've seen people that was poor, people that was considered good people, but for some reason they were mistreated even. Um, but the point is, it was very low. So for police to be being killed meant we had some kind of radical underground, so to speak. But as we got into the very, very, very end of the 70s, 70, 79, and then went into 80 forward, you kept seeing this decline in the number of officers being shot, serious injuries going down. There shouldn't have been none, but there was, and it was going down. Many police officers like me said, we feel safer being out here now than we ever have. But while Clinton was militarizing police departments, he had a guy that told him, he says, well, you're turning them into little armies. He said, you're damn right. This was a private conversation in the Oval Office with a man I know. And he says, however, he said, we're going to push community policing on the surface. So people will be watching this while we're working down here. We're going to militarize them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but what's this hand up here? We're going to teach these people to be community police, and we're going to put 100,000 police on the street. We're going to do all this stuff, but we're militarizing them down here. So watch
Mm-hmm.
this hand. Don't watch this hand. We're going to hide this one. We're going to do it, but you're watching this one. So everything's orchestrated, and there's a reason and a rhyme to all things. And I told people, I said, look, I don't know why God chose me to be in all these places and have relationships with so many diverse people from so many
Mm-hmm.
parts of the country and the world
Mm-hmm.
over my whole life, and to see things that some police, if they was a policeman for 100 years, they'd never see it once, and some of I've seen twice or three times. And of course, my preacher said that I had at the time. He said, he said many years ago, he said you already had a fabulous career and you could have quit 20 years ago. He said, but about 20 years ago, he said you told God you didn't want no fame, you didn't want no fortune. You wanted a house to live in, a car to get back and forth to work and where you had to go. You wanted a good family. You wanted a good relationship with Jesus. And the thing that you wanted more than anything else was for him to grant you knowledge that you could help yourself and help others. And said, you said this, and I've said it more than once. God said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once this is a honeycomb, and there's bees in there. Once I let you go into the honeycomb and look around and see what's really going on, you can't never have not been there.
That's right. And a lot of us are seeing precisely what you're talking about, that there's a huge orchestration and process over here. Many things have been brought together to bring us to this moment. So then the question becomes, how do we change this reality? And perhaps this is a good point, Brother Daymond, that we should think about bringing this conversation to a close today and perhaps revisiting some of these
Yes.
questions on another occasion. What's something that you might like to leave our listeners with in terms of, gaining some kind of hope in this situation where we are looking at the highly militarized police today? We are looking at the use of non-lethal technologies which are undisclosed and being kept from the public. We are looking at large numbers of targeted individuals who are reporting horrific human rights abuses. And we're looking at, a massive growing watch list as well. So what can we take away at this point in terms of hope, and how can each one of us have a part to play in this scenario?
Well, in the Bible, it teaches one man can do a lot, two men can do more, and so forth and so on. I say, whatever your community is, instead of you jumping out there and saying a bunch of things, because that's going to highlight you and get law enforcement or certain people that aren't properly trained to thinking you're automatically a nut. Now, there are people with mental health issues. There's a lot of people with mental health issues. Some of it's brought on by the medications doctors give you. They give you the wrong medication. Some of it's not the correct therapy. Some people have genetic defects. I don't know. But just because somebody seems to be talking crazy don't mean they're crazy. But the best way to thing is whether you belong to some civic groups locally or you meet with citizens about various things, then the way you communicate is to ask questions. Okay, this is a number one way. I've done a psychological studies and exams on this, and say if I go out in my community and people's talking about the weather and talking about church and some things come up in the community, say, I had read or I had seen on the internet some things about things called energy weapons. And they said that there's government officials that's actually gearing them and shooting them at people, harming them in their own private homes and businesses. Have you ever heard about that? They'll say, no, I don't know if it's true or not, but that's what I heard. And I've been looking into it. And it seems like there's really something to it. Then they start thinking, say, I'm going to do something, you ought to look into it. And they'll ask you, well, how do you Google that? And you tell them, and then they start Googling. The next time you see them, because I've tried this, I've done it with 100 things over my lifetime. Even back when we had encyclopedias and people had to go to the library, they did it. But they'd look stuff up, find out. Well, when you ask the question, you're not giving the answer. You're asking them, what do you think? Can you look into it? And then you bring awareness. Then when you got a good group of you together and you're known to be sane, and there's a group of you, now you're not singled out. Now you go to the city council. Now you go to the county commission. You get other groups in other areas to start bringing up questions. Then you go to your state legislature. And then you get laws passed within your state that says you can't do this, you can't do that, and that there's criminal penalties. You have people where you got 3 or 4 people in your community and you go meet with your federal representatives or your state senators, which are your federal senators from the state. There's 2 in each state. You go there and say, look, we have, don't take too much and overload them because they might be brand new to this too. Take 6 or 8 pages of some research that's not in teeny tiny print, and it covers like four areas, like it says energy weapons, microwave weapons, pulse technology, so forth and so on, and show that there's some articles and information on this, and try and meet with some of their key staff and go in a group of 4 or 5, where they can't just readily say, okay, well, thank you, and have a good day. There's a group of you, so now there's a lot of witnesses. Now you're coming as a group. You let them know, hey, we're registered and we vote. we want you to pay attention to this. And when you use the word we are your constituents, now you're giving them notice that you're in a relationship with them and they have a duty under their oath of office to work for you because now you're constituents. And tell
That's
them
brilliant advice.
we want we want you to look into this. And in
Mhm.
fact, we'll be back in 30 days and we want to know what you found out.
That's good. It sounds like you kind of have to keep on it because from what many people are telling me, they indeed go to their state representatives, they indeed go to their senators, and nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. However, the idea of writing legislation and handing it to your state legislature is a brilliant one. One person has indeed done that in California, Dr. Tomo Shibata. She's written a bill proposal. She has been speaking to legislators, assembly women in the California state legislature. She has
Right.
presented her bill proposal, and she's still trying to work her way through getting somebody to sponsor the bill, so to bring it onto the floor to make it an act. So these are very difficult things, it seems like, and it comes back to what you were talking about earlier. The police themselves are lobbying, so that's what she's experienced in California. Police groups, police associations have been lobbying against the bill because it asks for certain strictures against police who don't take action or who take wrongful action, against people who report such harassment and such
The
persecution.
the police many times, if they're within uh, good faith, if they're within reasonable understanding, they make mistakes, they have sovereign immunity. Okay. And they utilize that, and these unions have pushed to increase that. Now, fortunately, thus far, uh, some federal districts are better than others, and then the Supreme Court has held the line so far that when police cross a line, of course, the bar is pretty low. It should be much higher, but if police do certain things, then they still rule against them. But the police work on public relations through local media, and what they do is if you're a news reporter, you want to be friends, you want to get the stories, you want to do this, that, and the other. We say, well, here's what I got from you. I'm the communications guy, and here's what I got for you. So you read off our side of the story. You're not getting their side, then our side, and then doing a news story. You're getting one side, and so the police state they run the narrative. It's almost like communist television. It's run by
Right,
the law enforcement.
right,
And they have people in these associations that write up their news reports for them. They don't word it themselves. They have professionals that word these out, and it'll be things like, "We have good reason to believe." That just means we got a gut feeling, and sometimes, and they don't have the evidence they need, and sometimes they won't have no leads, and they'll say the leads are just pouring in, and there's nothing, and they'll say we've got other evidence. Well, the other evidence might be another officer saw whatever it is they said they saw, but they made it sound like it's something substantial. So,
right.
police departments get in a lot of propaganda themselves. But remember, all police, city, county, state, federal, are all under the executive branch of government. So if the governor in a state, if he basically orders the police not to do something and signs an order by the governor, they're under his branch of government. Okay, so the governor can control the police in his state or her state.
And that
So,
might very well be happening currently in many states, right?
yes, and the president he controls all the alphabet agencies. Okay, but again, see over like at the CIA,
Or they control him.
well, he controls them for the most part, the majority of the time. However, like I'm telling you, the people that's on the black ops operations that have been there for 20, 30, 40 years, they don't answer to nobody but whoever puts a paycheck in their hands.
And
Okay.
And it apparently appears that these Black Ops people are running a large part of what is going on currently. Every
Yes.
Right? Everything that's undisclosed, you can sort of put in the direction of those Black Ops agencies. So, or compartments or divisions or whatever they are off from inside the agencies. So
Yes.
that brings us back sort of full circle to, what can one do? And it sounds like persistence may be the answer, right? Work together in groups.
Yes. Group persistence. In other words,
Hmm.
when you see your representatives, you have to say, we'll be back in 30 days, or we'll be back, and give them a certain date that you'll be back.
That's very good advice. Yeah.
But, but guess what? If you come
Mhm.
back and they're conveniently gone, then you know to tell them you'll be back, but you're not sure when. That way you ambush them, so to speak. In other words, they're going to
Yeah.
hide out, then tell them I'm coming back. We're all coming back. But last time when we told you when was coming back, you disappeared. So next time it'll be a surprise visit and all
Hmm.
future visits.
Yeah.
But we're going to report on our meeting, and we're going to report on how you treat us, and we're going to report, and we keep lots of social media. So if you want to stay in office, you don't want us angry with you because we're going to tell it all. We ain't gonna make
That's.
nothing up, but we're gonna tell it all,
Hmm.
and we're gonna tell how you treat us, if you treated us as constituents, if you deserve to have an office of the people. You're our
Hmm.
public servant. You're to serve us. You're not to try and control us, but you are. So you're a deviant. You're in deviant behavior. You're not doing what the masters pay you to do. We, the people, are the masters, and you're the servants. You
Hmm.
know, if I got a butler and I tell him to bring the car around and he don't, I'm asking what his problem is. What's the problem? He said, I don't feel like bringing around. I said, well, okay, I don't feel like giving you a check. You're fired. Okay. So that's how we have to treat our servants.
Absolutely. I think that's a brilliant note on which to end this conversation, Chief Jones, because that is, stay persistent, work together in groups, and let your state reps know that, you're going to come back and you're going to keep pursuing it and you're going to report it. And I highly encourage that as well. Everybody, we need to speak more, we need to write more, we need to publish more on a continuous basis, not
This,
less,
this
but more.
system worked the same way, but I know a lady right now that's been working feverishly for the last month because she was
Mhm.
done wrong by some judicial officials and by an attorney. Okay, a motivated person can do a lot.
Yeah.
She is creating a multi interactive website where if you're a bad judge or a clerk of a court, if you're in the judicial branch, anything, an attorney, and you've done wrong, people's going to be able to go in there, put your name, put your bar card, what your position is,
That's
what interaction
fabulous.
you
I
have
think
with.
everybody should know that. If you have the link to that,
Yes.
please
Well,
send
she's
it.
creating it. It's the first ever.
Oh, okay.
And it's going to
Okay.
be a rating system just like Google. You're going to be able to rate judges and you're going to be able to rate lawyers
That's
and their
great.
clerks.
Hmm.
And and so she said, after we get the bugs worked out of this one, she said, I'm going to start one that we'll be able to work on state levels and federal levels for our elected officials. So we'll score them and you'll be able to see it in real time from real people.
Fabulous. And in fact, that's what we need for all of our representatives. Anybody
Yes.
who dares to say that they represent the people, other people need to just look at a rating score, a rating chart, and just see if they indeed do what they say that they
So let's just
are
say you
going
have
to do.
an assemblyman in California, right? And he or her, uh, you check all the boxes that they understand energy weapons, they understand the CIA, they understand this, and you go on these check boxes and they're getting, 7 to 10 on these things, then that's somebody, if you call them and talk to them, they're going to understand. And so then you make arrangements, say, I want us to go as a group and you as our senator and get 2 or 3 other senator
That's right.
representatives.
It would make it very easy just at a glance to kind of
Right.
figure out who are the ones who've been educated and who are the ones who still need to read a little bit more of my articles, perhaps, to
Right.
figure out, what's really going on in the country today and to
Yes,
understand
absolutely.
what's really going on. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Chief Jones, thanks so much. This has been a wide-ranging conversation. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughtfulness and all of the
Yes.
information you've given everybody. I want to thank everybody for watching, and stay tuned. We'll have Chief Jones back another time to focus on some other aspect of this big landscape over here. So thanks very much, everyone. Have a good night. Bye bye.